Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here. I wanted to commend Borderless World for organizing this activity. I'm always struck by the fact that the students are on to issues that matter in the world. They're establishing values and principles that I'm sure will carry throughout their lives. And I especially like the idea of Borderless World because it's non-hierarchical. Basically, it talks about interactions between us, Canada, the Western world, and the rest of the world in ways that involve back and forth conversations. We have to remember, I think, that development is not something that's done for or to people. It's something that, above all, that they do for themselves and with themselves. This is something that is a process that isn't above all agencies giving money to countries to do projects that have been decided in the first world. Essentially, people in the third world see themselves as engaged in development, which means taking their lives in directions that they want to see them. It means improving their family incomes, improving the health of their families, basically seeing themselves moving forward in ways that you might identify with yourselves. So it's important to keep in mind who leads the process, and that's the people who are involved and who are engaged. I have the privilege of teaching in the Canadian Field Study program in Africa, or the African Field Study semester. We go over to East Africa each year. We teach a variety of issues that have to do with development and environment, basically. I teach a course that's called Environment Development. I'm just back from East Africa, and I had a number of experiences. We have a long-term research project there, so I have the good fortune of being back and forth. So I'm going to say a few things that are informed both by my teaching here and also by my experience there. So where exactly do I go to get into my PowerPoint? I did a PowerPoint. Just go like this? There we are. Okay. This, I thought about what to speak on, and I thought, well, the devolution of governance is an issue that's really important. It's important in Kenya, but it also cuts across a number of countries. So I thought I'd make a few comments about the importance of the devolution of governance and use East Africa. But of course it applies everywhere. The issue here really is in the process of international development, the proposition that if we get the institutions right, then economic development will be facilitated. Of course, the question of who gets the institutions right, the international community, the IMF, the World Bank, the AID, they do play a role because they're donors and therefore they have a certain amount of leverage. But above all, it's the people in the countries who are shaping their institutions that matter. And I want to talk a bit about that. Keeping in mind, what is development? I always try to say, in my own mind, development is maendeleo, which in East Africa means basically the going forward. It's a way locally that people conceive of the process. They don't necessarily say development is when we get a grant from the World Bank. They say it's when we as a society move forward that development is occurring. We know that rising incomes and economic growth is certainly important. People all over the world see that as important. But we also know that the question of inequality that results from a very dynamic and growing economy is a serious one. Most of you, I'm sure, know the work of Amartya Sen on development conceived as increasing capabilities. That is to say that the expansion of the possibility of choosing among options that are broadening and essentially experiencing enhanced quality of life. So whatever it is, this is really what the fundamental issue of development should be considered. Who are the ideal subjects of development? I'm going to refer here to some work by Collier. Incomes are rising for 4 billion people in the world. So in fact, development has been doing okay in the last few decades. Incomes are rising for 4 billion people, and that makes a big difference. But they are falling for 1 billion. So you have the question which Canada continues to debate, and it actually its policy flip-flops. And that's whether to build on strength, trying to invest where you know that there's going to be a difference because there's already a demonstrated effect, or addressing the poorest of the poor. And this is a moral choice, and it's one that you can build a case on either side. But this is something that Canada is debating, and I think would be useful to give some thought to. The predicament of the bottom billion, the poorest of the poor, is essentially that they have little capital to build on. How can their means, their scarce means, be somehow increased or enhanced so that their capabilities will grow? That's, I think, a key question. Are there any game changers? In every area of development, one involves thinking about the game changer. That is to say, the area of initiative which is going to not just affect that project, but is going to spill over and affect the entire system. Large-scale infrastructural projects, building roads and dams. In fact, it turns out that Canadians aren't bad at that, and they make quite a few dams and roads in the world. A lot of Canadian aid is given simply for infrastructural improvements that basically are building on what Canadians do well. It also hires Canadians. A large percentage of these projects basically to hire Canadians to go do things. They do make a difference. I don't think we can just wipe them off the map. But often they have negative spin-offs, and we have to think about how to better improve or avoid those negative spin-offs. Global markets. This has made an enormous difference for China. Why is China I think it's now is it the third or the second largest economy in the world? Essentially, that's been driven out of the opening of their markets by the Western world, by Europe and North America to Chinese products. So globalization of markets has worked, and it does work in some areas, but markets often themselves consume the small producer. And by controlling their assets, they basically come to control their productive process and pay them little for their products. We had the enjoyment and educational possibility of visiting a number of corporations in East Africa that were involved in global markets. One was a set of flower farms in Naivasha, which are basically ship flowers. Every day they ship at least 1 or 2 747s full of fresh flowers that then arrive in the European market and then very quickly, within hours, go and get distributed around Europe, and some of them end up in North America. So a lot of, you might enjoy Kenyan flowers. And so we looked very carefully at what it meant for the employment, the wages, the benefits of the workers, and what it meant for the entire country to have that source of foreign aid. It's a mixed blessing. None of the people who were working in the flower farm wanted to give up those jobs. They were important. And yet they saw that their benefits could have been certainly much better. We also went to an area where they're producing vegetables. And there they would, it's a very remote area, way down in the southern part of Kenya, in a very arid area, but it's an area with irrigation. And they're producing what they call Asian vegetables, so eggplants, etc., for immediate export. However, the middleman had over time driven down the price by negotiating not with the entire farmer cooperative, but by individual farmers. So this was becoming less and less profitable. It seems to me in this little micro way, it illustrates the benefits of having a globalized market. On the other hand, some of the drawbacks. Some people have emphasized institutions, and this is what I was just going to spend a few minutes talking about. Douglas North, the Nobel Prize-winning economist, believed that the key to historical Western